Hey, this is Football X Analytics. In this video, we'll be setting up the stage for Super Bowl II between the Oakland Raiders and the Green Bay Packers. We'll briefly discuss the founding of both franchises and how they progressed through the 1967 season. Make the football gods proud. Like and subscribe! So let's get started. The game was played on January 14th, 1968 at the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. The Oakland Raiders showed up with the still franchise record 13-1. Defending Super Bowl champions Green Bay Packers came in with a 9-4-1 record. Let's take a look at the history of the Oakland Raiders. The franchise was founded in 1960. In their first 3 seasons, the team only won 9 of their first 42 games. In 1963, Al Davis took over as coach and led them to a 10-4 record. From 1964 to 66, they finished second in their division twice. In 1966, Al Davis left the team to be the AFL commissioner. John Rock took over as coach. The Raiders' first pick in the 1967 AFL draft was the future Hall of Famer Gene Upshaw, who would play the offensive guard position. They also had another Hall of Fame lineman, center Jim Otto. 3 other Hall of Famers on the team: wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff, cornerback Willie Brown, and George Blanda, who was their backup quarterback and their primary kicker. The Raiders started the season by shutting out the Denver Broncos, 51-0. Then they easily defeated the Boston Patriots 35-7 before facing the defending AFC champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Their quarterback Darryl LaMonica had a big game with 236 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they defeated the Chiefs 23-21. After 3 consecutive home games, they traveled to New York to face Joe Namath's Jets. LaMonica threw 4 interceptions and sacked 3 times, as the Jets would give the Raiders their only defeat of the season. They traveled to Buffalo and pulled out a victory as the defense sacked Jack Kemp 11 times and got 2 interceptions. The Raiders traveled to Boston, and LaMonica had another big game with 4 touchdown passes. They broke the 50-point mark for the second time of the season with a 51-10 thumping of the San Diego Chargers. LaMonica threw for 316 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns, and ran for 2 more. In Denver, the Broncos played a tougher game, but the Raiders still came out on top. After the bye week, they hosted the Miami Dolphins, and LaMonica connected with Billy Cannon for 3 touchdowns and pulled off a sloppy win. Visiting the struggling AFC champions, who were barely 500 at the time, the defense intercepted Lance Alson 4 times and sacked him 6 times. LaMonica went to San Diego and threw 4 touchdowns as the Raiders put 41 on the Chargers. At Houston, the Oilers were up at halftime 7-0 before the defense shut out the Oilers in the second half. And George Blanda kicked 4 field goals. The 7-5-1 Jets visited Oakland. This time the Raiders got the better of the Jets, as LaMonica threw for 3 touchdowns. The last game of the season was with the Buffalo Bills at home. Hewitt Dixon broke the 21-21 tie with a 6-yard touchdown run. In the AFC Championship game, they defeated the Houston Oilers 40-7. The Raiders finished the season with a 10-game winning streak and a franchise-best 13-1 mark. The Raiders scored more than 30 points in 8 games, more than 40 points 5 times, and more than 50 twice. They led the league in sacks with 67 in 14 games, and 665 yards lost from those sacks is still an NFL record. Let's take a look at the Green Bay Packers. Their history is a lot more extensive than the Oakland Raiders. We've created an 8-minute video briefly documenting the key moments of the Green Bay Packers starting from 1921 up to the first Super Bowl. Just know this: in 1966, they had 11 Hall of Famers and a Hall of Fame coach. The 1967 NFL season introduced the New Orleans Saints. The Saints were given an expansion draft, and in that draft, they took the Packers center, Bill Curry, and their halfback, Paul Hornung. Green Bay would also lose Jim Taylor to the Saints, who would sign with them for a 4-year deal. So, still with 9 Hall of Fame players, with Lombardi's running game depleted, he would lean on Elijah Pitts, Jim Grabowski, and Donnie Anderson. He also would draft Travis Williams from Arizona State University. First game of the season was against the visiting Detroit Lions in Lambeau Field. Bart Starr had 321 passing yards on 14 completions, but had 4 interceptions. One of those was a pick 6 for the first score of the game. The Lions had a 17-0 lead at halftime, but the Packers defense shut out the Lions in the second half, and the offense made some big plays to come back. Don Chandler, with a minute left to play in the fourth quarter, tied the game with a 28-yard field goal. The Chicago Bears were the next visitors. Starr's interceptions continued as he threw 5 against the Chicago defense, but the Packers defense held the Bears to only 6 first downs. Jim Grabowski ran for 111 yards and a touchdown, and Don Chandler kicked a 46-yard field goal in the fourth quarter to seal the victory. Atlanta Falcons were the third team to visit Lambeau. The Falcons ran 50 plays, gaining only 58 yards. It was not competitive, as the Falcons would get shut out. Bart Starr suffered a bruised shoulder early in the game and would not return. Zeke Brakowski would lead the Packers to victory. Carroll Dale caught 2 of Brakowski's passes for touchdowns. The Packers would travel to Detroit, where they would score 17 points in the fourth quarter to put the game away. Going back home to host the Minnesota Vikings, the winless Vikings scored 10 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to give the Packers their first defeat of the season. The Packers secondary did not allow a completed pass and got 2 interceptions from Joe Kapp. With 8 seconds left in the game, Fred Cox kicked a 12-yard field goal to beat the Packers. Visiting the New York Giants, Bart Starr returns to the starting lineup and scored 28 points in the fourth quarter to defeat the Giants. Elijah Pitts gets 3 rushing touchdowns, and Jim Grabowski ran for 123 yards. After New York, they traveled to St. Louis to face the Cardinals, scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in this victory. Then they traveled to Baltimore to face the undefeated Colts. They had shut out the Colts for 3 quarters, but in the 4th quarter, Johnny Unitas gave the Packers their second defeat when they scored 13 points. At home against the Cleveland Browns, Travis Williams sparked the Packers to wallop the Browns when he returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. They would score 35 points in the first quarter and have a total of 7 turnovers for the whole game. Travis would then proceed to score another kickoff return by the end of the first quarter for another touchdown. Hosting the San Francisco 49ers, the Packers defense got their second shutout of the season with a 13-0 victory. Lombardi and the boys traveled to Chicago and defeated the Bears 17-13. With that victory, they clinched the Central Divisional title. With the rotational system that the NFL had designed, they would have home field advantage for the playoffs. Traveling to Minnesota, they defeated the Vikings 30-27. The Packers then went to LA to play the Rams and lost 24-27. In their last game of the season, the visiting Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Packers 17-24. The Green Bay Packers finished first in the Central Division. Despite having only 9 wins, the Packers get home field advantage due to a rotational home field advantage system that the NFL had been using for some time. In the other conference championship game, the Dallas Cowboys hosted the Cleveland Browns. In the divisional playoff game, they faced the Los Angeles Rams, who had defeated them 2 weeks earlier. The defense sacked Roman Gabriel 5 times. Henry Jordan got 3 of them. Bart Starr completed 74 of his passes, and Carroll Darrell was the leading receiver with 6 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. The Rams scored first, but failed to put more points on the scoreboard the next 3 quarters, as the Packers scored 4 touchdowns and advanced to the NFL Championship game against the Dallas Cowboys. The 1967 NFL Championship game in Green Bay is called the Ice Bowl for a reason. Temperatures were minus 15 degrees, which did not include the wind chill factor. The turf heating system malfunctioned, and that allowed the field to freeze in the extreme cold. The Wisconsin State University lacrosse band canceled their halftime show as their instruments froze and they could not use their brass instruments. 7 members were transported to the hospital for hypothermia. The officials were unable to use their whistles after the opening kickoff, and a spectator would die in the stands from exposure. So that gives you a backdrop of what the players were experiencing. Let's get into it. The game started with a 16-play, 83 yards opening drive by the Green Bay Packers, which accumulated with an 8-yard TD pass to Boyd Dowler. In the second quarter, the Packers made it 14-0 when Starr faked to Ben Wilson and threw a 43-yard touchdown pass to Boyd Dowler, who would get a second touchdown for the day. Despite not getting the first down in the second half, Dallas found a way to score. Starr would fumble while being sacked by Willie Towns. The Cowboys recovered and returned at 7 yards for their first score of the game. The Cowboys would get a field goal when Willie Wood fumbled a punt, and the Cowboys recovered on the 17-yard line. Neither team scored in the third quarter, despite the Cowboys having several opportunities. The first play in the fourth quarter, running back Dan Reeves threw to Lance Rensel for a 50-yard touchdown pass to take the lead, 17-14. With 4 minutes and 50 seconds left in the fourth quarter, the Green Bay Packers got the ball back on their own 32-yard line. Starr fakes the double handoff and throws to Donnie Anderson for 6 yards. Chuck Marcine chugs his way along the right side for 4 yards. He gets the first down. Bart Starr throws to Boyd Dowler for a 13-yard completion. That's another first down. Donnie Anderson is tackled behind the line of scrimmage for a big loss of 9 yards by Willie Towns. Starr throws to Donnie Anderson, who slips away for a 12-yard gain. 3rd and 7. Starr throws to Donnie Anderson for 9 yards. He gets the first down. It's an impressive 2nd and 19 conversion. Starr dumps it off to Chuck Marcine on the left side, who runs for 19 yards. He gets the first down. He's on the 11-yard line. Starr hands off to Marcine, who runs up the middle for 8 yards. 2nd and 1. Starr hands off to Donnie Anderson for 1 yard. He gets the first down. 1st and goal. They give it to Donnie Anderson again, but he gains no yards. And they give him another one for 2nd and goal, but no gain. They call timeout. Bart Starr and Vince Lombardi talk about what they're going to do. Starr tells Lombardi he's going to just run it in. Lombardi said, "Do it and let's get out of here." Starr doesn't tell the players what he's going to do. They just assume it's going to be a handoff to Chuck Marcine. 3rd and goal and 16 seconds left. Starr keeps the ball and runs up the middle for 1 yard. Touchdown. Take a look at the play again. Chuck Marcine was expecting the handoff. Check the line. They just bullied their way through it. And that's how the Packers get to Super Bowl II. Congratulations, you've reached the end of the video. This is the first of 5 parts, as this set up how both teams made it to the Super Bowl. The next 4 videos will go into details into each quarter. Again, thank you for watching, and like and subscribe.